Hey, welcome back to the channel. So BenQ sent me out this EX2780Q gaming monitor, and I'm going to be reviewing that today. Now, even though they sent it out to me, all the opinions of the device are my own, and nobody's previewing this video before I publish it. So let's get right into the review. The BenQ EX2780Q is a beautiful 27-inch IPS Quad HD display. It's got a wide color gamut with HDR, FreeSync, and 144 Hz. Now, that 144 Hz is really mostly for gaming, but it makes everything that you do with this display seem that much smoother. Even just navigating around the operating system feels much snappier and smoother than on a lower refresh rate monitor. This BenQ display has a bunch of connectivity for various devices. It's got two HDMI 2 ports, a full-size DisplayPort, that's DisplayPort 1.4, a USB-C port, and a 3.5mm headphone jack. Now you can plug your own headphones into this, but it also has built-in 2.1 speakers, and these speakers actually sound pretty good. They get a little bit muddy on the low end, but for consuming media and playing games, they're actually very decent for in-display speakers. But if you want to adjust that volume for either the headset or the speakers, one thing that's really nice about this display is it has a volume knob on the lower left-hand side. A lot of displays, you have to go through this whole menu system to get to the volume for your headphone or the built-in speakers. This one just has a knob right on the left-hand side. It's a nice little feature to have. Another thing that's nice about this display is BenQ's HDR Technology. Now what this is it's a bunch of settings that let you dial in the display for exactly how you're using it, whether you're media creation, playing games, browsing the web. You can dial it in to exactly what you're doing to reduce the fatigue on your eyes. Now, there's a lot of information around this, so I'll have a link down in the description to a document that has all the details if you want to read up more about that. So I've been using this display as my primary display for a few weeks now, and I gotta say it's been fantastic for both like media creation and browsing around the web and playing games. It's been very clear. I will say when I first hooked it up and booted into Windows and Linux, I saw the same thing. The text was a little bit blurry, a little bit fuzzy, but I was able to go into the settings and dial it in for a very clear display. It's clear in all situations now. It just took me a little time to tweak those settings. And that's one thing that's really nice about this display is there is a ton of settings to go in and tweak it for exactly how you're using your display. This display is marketed as a gaming monitor, so let's talk about gaming, and games look amazing on this display. If your game natively supports HDR, it's going to use the HDR that the display is capable of, and even if your game is not capable of HDR, the monitor will do simulated HDR, which improves the visuals a little bit, and you can do HDR for gaming or for operating system. There's a few different options in there. But that simulated HDR does make things pop a little bit more. Now, one thing that if you've had experience with HDR in games, sometimes when you're in dark areas, it's super dark and it doesn't handle the transition between light and dark. Well, BenQ has its own HDRI technology, which basically improves the contrast and boosts the saturation for more details. And it really helps in those environments when normal HDR would just be so dark and kind of a uniform color where it's hard to see anything. This monitor handles that stuff much better to where you have more clarity in those those dark environments, and when you do those transitions. That's one thing I really noticed with this display for those HDR games. It handles that transition much better than other displays that I've used. All right, this next thing I want to talk about is a fantastic feature, but for me, it's not ideal. And that is the cable management that's built into the base and the location of the ports. Now, instead of the ports being flat on the back of the display, they're kind of up underneath, and then you can route the cables through a hollow channel within the base for cable management, and that works great. That's a fantastic feature to have. Now, where it's problematic for me is I change things so much with all the gear that I test out and the videos that I do. I'm constantly plugging and unplugging. And as a result, I don't use that cable management other than for the power. That's the only thing I have routed through there. Now, again, that's because of the nature of the videos I do and stuff like that. But for the most part, for most people, you're probably going to have that hooked up and have those cables in place, running it through that channel. It makes it very neat, and it's a very good feature to have. So the last thing to mention is where the layout of the power and navigation buttons are, and that's on the right-hand lower side. Really easy to get to, a really good location for that stuff if you ask me. You can get in and tweak all those settings, all those specific entries that I was talking about to dial this thing in exactly the way you want it. And that's one thing that has made this my primary display, and it will stay my primary display even after this review. Number one is the amount of settings, how you can dial this thing in exactly. Number two, and I know it seems small, but that little volume control on the left-hand side, that's huge for me, not having to go to the operating system or into the menus to adjust the volume. And the last thing that I really like is that it's Quad HD natively. Even when I use a 4K display, I usually scale it down to Quad HD anyway. It's just a little easier on the eyes. So having this native Quad HD with the clarity that entails, all the settings, the HDR, the 144 Hertz, this is a fantastic monitor and I'm very, very happy with it. I still use the other one as my secondary display, but this will continue to be my primary display. As always, if you have questions on anything that I talked about in this video, feel free to leave a comment. I'll have some links down below to more information about the display and a link out to Amazon if you want to check it out for yourself. Hopefully you found this useful and informative. If you did, hit that thumbs up. If you really liked it, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when I put up my next video. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.